today's video, we're going to look at hip tilt and pressure shift. So if you haven't seen much pressure data, this is what it looks like. At least the visual representation of it. You got our foot here on the left, our foot here on the right, matching up exactly with where the golfer is positioned. And the more intense the color, the more pressure is in that location of the foot. And we're going to take a look at how this golfer shifts. And this is our pro golfer. And we've picked him because he is a very neutral golf swing, very neutral ball flight, very straight ball flight. Doesn't do anything really out of the ordinary. So he's kind of a good study to look at here, how he shifts his pressure relative to a very kind of, we'll call it vanilla, not derogatory in any means, but a vanilla golf swing that produces very solid, very straight golf shots. So we can see golfers shift their pressure to the right, and that's what that big golf ball, or not golf ball, that big white ball is there in the middle of his body. That's the combined center of pressure, and you can see the numbers down here in the bottom left and bottom right with what that represents. So most golfers shift their pressure to the right in the backswing, very common. And you can see also that his hips are tilting. That's the side bend number of the pelvis and the rib cage. That's his tilt. So when it's a negative, his right hip is higher than his left. When it's positive, his right hip is lower than his left. So like most golfers, or hopefully most golfers, the hips tilt in the backswing. The left hip goes lower, the right hip goes higher. And that's very common. But that in and of itself does not shift pressure forward in the golf swing. We've heard a few comments on the YouTube channel that that's what's responsible for shifting pressure forward, and it's actually not. So we can see here he's got roughly 12.2, let's say, let's call it 12.2 degrees to his tilt in his hips, and we can see he's maxed pressure on his right side, roughly 70%. So having that hip tilt does not mean pressure is going to go forward. In this case, pressure is moving back like all normal golf swings. Pressure goes to the right foot first. Then as we go back to that same number, so it never does get out of the 12s in hip tilt, but as we go back to that same number at 12.2, we'll call it downswing or early downswing transition, we can see that now he shifted himself pressure-wise back to 50-50. So if we look at that again, you can see it rides over here, and then without moving a degree, watch his sway numbers. They move significantly, going from negative 0.4 to a positive 1.6. So that's roughly 2 inches of lateral sway with the upper body, and then he went from a negative 0.8 with the lower body to a positive 0.8. So basically another 1.5 inches of sway with the lower body. So that's really what is shifting his pressure. It's not having a left hip lower or having that hip tilt. That's all good for a lot of things in the golf swing, but that in and of itself does not shift pressure. We can see the golfer manipulating his centers, his upper body center and his lower body center is really what moves that pressure, because as we scroll him forward, we can see the hips start to level out. They start to lose tilt, and his pressure is really sliding over to his front side now. And this is what we see a lot of great golfers do. So at this point, at his left arm parallel, and it's a little bit of a skewed camera angle because I wanted you to see the sway graphs there, the sway traces combined with the center of pressure trace on the ground. So you're looking kind of down through his back. But that's left arm parallel for this golfer, 83% on his left foot. And then as we scroll him forward, you can see the hips continuing to level out. They level out at roughly 90% on the left foot. And then right at impact for this golfer, he is essentially reversed where he was at the top of his swing. So that 12.2 number, now we see 12.7, which I think was his max tilt at the top. Now it's reversed. His left hip now is higher. He has the opposite hip tilt, and he's now 85% on his front side. So all of that hip movement where it went 12.5 degrees high to the right to 12.5 degrees high to the left all happened in less than a quarter of a second. And as that's changing, his pressure continued to move up and really stabilized right at this left arm parallel number, right at this 83 number. And then at impact, I think he was 85 or 86. 86. So it's only moved 3 percentage points net. So that's quite stable. That's showing us that he has a lot of rotation coming into the golf ball rather than a lot of slide, a lot of forward thrust, we'll call it, coming into the golf ball. And we much prefer rotation into the golf ball rather than a big pressure move forward. So if we see golfers coming in who have their hips tilt and are thinking they should hang back on that back foot to rotate, we see a lot of instances where they're at this left arm parallel spot and they're still close to 50-50 in the backswing, or 50-50 on the back foot, and then really late, kind of at this shaft parallel, they make a big pressure, hard pressure move forward to that lead foot, and that really tiniest of windows, we see a lot of difficulty with those players playing out of the center of the club face. And it's one of the things that we really prefer is rotation through the shot rather than a lot of sliding through the shot. And it all goes into when and how you set that pressure move up early. So we absolutely want the hip tilt at the top of the backswing. It's a great thing to have. But we also got to know how to manipulate those centers, that upper body center especially. Most golfers can throw that bottom center, their hip center all around, but they need to know how to use that upper body center on top of that lower body center to really manipulate the pressure trace, the pressure movements, and the ground forces to their advantage in this shrinking window of the downswing.